Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today is Sunday, February 8th, 2026.
Just to be here.
We are jumping straight into the thick of it today. We're looking at three very specific pieces of legislation for veterans.
All of them signed into law just a few weeks ago on January 20th.
Exactly. And before we really get going, just a quick nudge to please hit that like and subscribe button on your feed. It does really help us out.
It does.
So, as you said, less than 3 weeks ago, we had three bills: House Resolution 224, House Resolution 1823, and House Resolution 4446.
And they all transitioned from bills into public laws.
Right. And, honestly, given the last 6 months we've had in Washington,
Oh, yeah.
the fact that anything at all became law is, that's a headline in itself.
It really is. That's the elephant in the room we have to address first.
Totally. You can't talk about these three bills without acknowledging the ecosystem they were born into.
Mm-hmm.
We're sitting here in February 2026, and we're still kind of shaking off the dust from the longest government shutdown in U.S. history.
43 days.
43 days, all over ACA subsidies. And that was just the grand finale.
Right, the finale to a session that was completely defined by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the OBBBA.
A name that, well, history is definitely going to study that name.
I think so.
It sounds friendly, right? But the reality has been this brutal fiscal restructuring. We saw Medicaid slashed.
Significant cuts to SNAP.
And just a general freeze on discretionary spending almost everywhere. The mood has been cut at all costs.
That's the context. The 119th Congress has been operating with, let's say, a machete, not a scalpel.
And yet,
in the middle of all this, these three veteran bills didn't just pass. They sort of glided through.
yeah, House Resolution 224 and the others, they moved using suspension of the rules in the House.
And unanimous consent in the Senate.
Which means nobody fought them. Not a soul. In a Congress that will fight about the font size on a memo, everyone agreed to fast-track these.
It suggests that the veteran label might be the only real shield left against those OBBA cuts.
The only untouchable rail left on the track.
But, and I think this is the core of what we're talking about today, that protection isn't free. These laws, they frame veteran support not just as, spending money. They frame it as institutional accountability.
And effective government.
Exactly.
So, let's unpack that. We've got three laws.
Yeah.
One on housing, one on money, and one on jobs. Start with housing.
Okay.
This is House Resolution 224, which is now Public Law 1/1970, the Disabled Veterans Housing Support Act.
And this law is fascinating because it fixes a problem that, logic says shouldn't even exist, but bureaucracy insisted that it did.
The benefits cliff.
The benefits cliff, yeah. Specifically in HUD programs.
Right. And to understand why this is such a big deal, you have to look at how we define income. For decades, if a veteran was injured in the line of duty, let's say they lost a limb, they get disability compensation from the VA.
Which is, legally speaking, restitution. It's not a salary. It's a payment for the loss of physical or mental faculty.
It's an attempt to make up for a permanent loss.
Right. But the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, they didn't really see it that way.
No, they looked at that check and they said, that's income.
They treated it the same as if you were, driving for a rideshare app on the weekends.
So think about a real-world scenario. A veteran, let's call her Sarah. She's in low-income housing that's funded by the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG.
Okay.
She's barely scraping by. Then the VA reevaluates her injuries and says, Sarah, your condition has actually worsened. We're increasing your disability rating.
So she gets, what, an extra $400 a month in restitution?
Right. And under the old rules, HUD sees that $400.
And says, congratulations, Sarah, you just made too much money.
You're no longer low income. You're evicted.
She loses her housing because she got sicker.
It's the definition of a perverse incentive.
It's just a complete systemic failure. So Public Law 1/1970 goes in and amends Section 102A20 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974.
And says what?
It specifically mandates that service-connected disability compensation must be excluded when you're determining if someone qualifies as low or moderate income, at least for CDBG programs.
So Sarah keeps her house. Her disability check effectively becomes invisible to the income verifiers.
For those CDBG programs, yes. Congress is finally asserting this philosophy that disability pay is not disposable income.
It shouldn't count against you when you need help.
Exactly.
Now, on the surface, this feels like a clear, unambiguous win. But I was looking at the text of the law, and I see a provision that hints at something bigger.
Uh-huh.
There's a mandate here for something called a Section 3 report.
That is the critical piece of this whole puzzle.
What is it?
The law requires the Comptroller General, the GAO, to conduct a study within 1 year, and they have to review all HUD programs, not just CDBG, to see if this exclusion should apply across the board.
Okay, that sounds good, but here's where the rubber meets the road. We know from that whole OBBBA context that the bucket of money for housing is not getting any bigger.
No, the bucket is definitely not getting bigger. It's probably shrinking.
So if we change the rules so that these veterans effectively look poorer on paper by ignoring their disability income,
they move to the front of the line for aid.
They move to the front of the priority list, but the line is still there. So if the veteran moves to the front, who gets pushed to the back?
And that is the uncomfortable reality of a zero-sum policy game.
Right.
By prioritizing disabled veterans, you are creating a secondary competition. The person getting pushed to the back might be a single mother working 2 minimum wage jobs.
Or an elderly person on a fixed pension who isn't a veteran.
Exactly. It's a classic rob Peter to pay Paul situation, except both Peter and Paul are in desperate need.
And Congress gets to claim a victory for helping veterans.
Without actually allocating any new funds to house everyone, they're just rearranging the deck chairs and making sure veterans get the seats first.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
A legislative win that just creates an administrative ethical dilemma for every housing authority in the country.
And we're just on the first bill. This theme of, fixing the numbers continues right into the second piece of legislation.
Which is arguably even more aggressive.
I'd say so.
Okay, let's move to that one. House Resolution 1823, now Public Law 1/1971, the VA Budget Shortfall Accountability Act. This one didn't come out of nowhere. This was born from a massive breach of trust, wasn't it?
Oh, a catastrophic breach of trust. To understand the anger behind this bill, you have to go back to that scare in 2024 and 2025.
I remember this so clearly. The Department of Veterans Affairs came to Capitol Hill and just hit the panic button.
They did. They said, we are running out of money. If you don't give us billions of dollars, checks are going to stop.
And the numbers were huge. They projected a $2.9 billion shortfall for benefits in 24.
And then a staggering $12 billion shortfall for medical care in 2025.
$12 billion. That is not a rounding error. That's a massive hole.
It's a terrifying number if you rely on the VA for your health care. So Congress did what Congress does in an emergency.
They tasked supplemental funding. Public Law 1/1882 to plug the hole.
They put out the fire.
But then the smoke cleared.
And there was no fire. By October of 2024, the VA had to come back and admit they were wrong.
They were wrong.
Very wrong. The Veterans Benefits Administration didn't have a shortfall. They had a $2.1 billion surplus.
A surplus.
And the medical shortfall was wildly overestimated.
It's like telling your boss you need a huge advance because you can't make rent, and then they find out you had $2,000 in a savings account the whole time.
You'd be fired instantly. In this case, Congress couldn't fire the whole VA, so they decided to police them instead.
And Representative Jack Bergman introduced this bill to basically institute, what are they calling them, forensic audits?
Yeah, and forensic audit is a heavy term. That's what you do when you suspect fraud. Embezzlement.
So what does that actually look like for a huge government agency like the VA?
Well, it's very intrusive. The law mandates 2 things. First, an immediate autopsy.
An autopsy.
Within 30 days of enactment, so by the end of this month, the GAO has to tear apart those 2024 and 2025 estimates.
They want to see every email, every spreadsheet, every assumption.
Everything that led to that $12 billion mistake. They want a public shaming of the math.
But there's a second part.
Yes, and that's the long game. For the next 5 years, through 2031, the GAO is required to conduct annual reviews. They'll compare the VA's spending plan against its actual monthly obligations.
So the VA is effectively on probation.
That's a good way to put it.
They have a parole officer, the GAO, who's checking their bank statements every single month for 5 years.
That's the mechanism. And the stated goal is to prevent these false alarms. But there's a massive risk here that we have to talk about.
The chilling effect.
The chilling effect, absolutely.
I can see that. I mean, if I'm a mid-level manager at the VA, and I know that if I predict a shortfall and I turn out to be wrong, I'm going to get forensically audited.
Right.
I'm going to stop predicting shortfall.
You become paralyzed, you play it safe, you under-ask for money.
You might see a potential shortage for, say, a new medication. But you think, well, I'm not 100% sure, and I don't want the GAO in my office again, so I'll just wait.
And by the time you wait, the shortage is real. And it's the veterans who suffer because the bureaucracy was too scared to ask for the cash it needed.
That's the pendulum swinging too far in the other direction.
It is. In the quest for perfect accounting, you might just sacrifice operational agility. You're trading potential waste for guaranteed paralysis.
Seems like the theme here is just tightening the leash. We tightened the leash on housing eligibility, they've tightened the leash on the budget, and now we move to the third bill, which tightens the leash on the veterans themselves.
That brings us to House Resolution 4446, now Public Law 11972.
The FAST v. EATS Act.
The acronyms are getting better, I'll give them that. Focused Assistance and Skills Training.
This one targets the Veteran Readiness and Employment Program, or VRNE.
Right. And in the context of this OBBA economy, speed is the new religion.
Get people off the benefits rolls and onto payrolls. Immediately.
Speed is the currency. And VRNE is the program that helps veterans with service-connected disabilities retrain for new careers.
Historically, it was a fairly flexible program. I always thought of it as a kind of GI Bill for retraining.
It used to function a bit like a scholarship. It was interest-based. A veteran could start a program to become a lawyer, realize halfway through, you know what, I hate this, I'd rather be a graphic designer.
And they could often petition to change their track.
Exactly, because people are human, and sometimes we pick the wrong career at 22.
Right.
Congress, however, started viewing that flexibility as programmatic lingering. They felt veterans were staying in the training phase for too long.
So Public Law 11972 changes the entire philosophy of the program. It shifts it from education to employment.
It amends 38 U.S.C. 32107, and the language is stark.
A veteran can no longer change their vocational plan just because they want to.
No. Desire is no longer a valid metric. The Secretary can only approve a new plan if two very specific conditions are met.
What are they?
First, the current goal must be no longer feasible because of a change in the veteran's employment handicap.
Which means your disability got worse or it changed, and you physically cannot do the job you were training for anymore.
And second, the new goal has to be likelier to lead to a job.
Think about what that means in practice. The old system was like a university saying, find your passion, we'll support you. This new system is like corporate retraining.
It is exactly like corporate retraining. The government is the corporation, and they're saying, we are not paying for your self-discovery. We are paying to get you back on the assembly line.
So if you're halfway through a welding program and you realize you are terrified of fire, but your disability doesn't technically prevent you from welding, you're stuck.
Under the strict letter of this law, yes. If you can physically hold the torch, you're becoming a welder.
Whether you be a happy welder or a good welder.
Or a welder who keeps that job for more than 3 months, that's irrelevant to the statute.
That just feels incredibly short-sighted. Sure, you get the veteran employed in 2027.
Check the box.
But if they hate the job, they quit in 2028. Then they're unemployed again, only now they've used up their one shot at the VRNE benefit.
But they're off the books. And in this 119th Congress, getting them off the books is the metric of success. The Committee on Veterans Affairs was very clear. They want velocity.
They want exits from the system. It treats veterans like widgets in a supply chain, not people rebuilding their lives.
It prioritizes the outcome, the job, over the process of rehabilitation.
So when we step back and look at this trilogy of laws, Public Laws 11970, 71, and 72, there's a very clear story forming.
It's a narrative of a grand bargain.
It is. It feels like a deal was struck somewhere. The deal is, we know the OBBA is cutting everything. We will protect you, the veteran. We'll make sure your disability check doesn't cost you your house.
Right.
But in exchange, we own the data and we own the path.
That's it, exactly. We will audit your agency until they are terrified to make a mistake.
That's Public Law 11971.
And we will force you into the most efficient labor path, regardless of what you actually want to do.
Public Law 11972. It's a shift from a grateful nation providing support
to an efficient state managing a liability.
That's a harsh way to put it, but I think the legislative text supports that reading. It's a move toward high accountability, low flexibility governance.
And we are the test case. These 3 bills are, relatively speaking, small, but they set a precedent.
They absolutely do. If the GAO comes back in a year and says, hey, excluding that disability income for veterans worked great to lower the poverty numbers on paper, we might see that logic applied somewhere else.
Or if the forensic audits really do save billions at the VA, we might see the Department of Education or the EPA getting the same treatment next year.
And if the VRNE strictness gets people into jobs faster, we could see unemployment benefits for civilians tied to these mandatory training paths you can't opt out of.
It's a distinct possibility. These three bills could be the pilot programs for how the entire government runs in the late 2020s.
So that's where we find ourselves on this Sunday in February. The laws are signed. The audits are starting. The clock is ticking on those housing reports.
And Sarah, our hypothetical veteran, she keeps her house, but maybe she loses her choice of career.
That's the trade-off. We're going to be watching those GAO reports very closely as they start to come in. If you want to read the raw text for yourself, and we always recommend you do, look up Public Laws 11970, 11971, and 11972.
The devil is always in the details.
Thank you so much for helping us parse through all the legalese today.
It was a pleasure.
And thank you, our listener, for spending part of your weekend with us. We'll keep an eye on the 119th Congress, so you don't have to. Until next time.